Hey there, everyone. It's Doc Hallaq again here with your photo and design workshop. Today, we're going to get a lot more creative than we have been. I hope you have fun with this today. Jump on in with a creative pool and let's go ahead and get to work. Just a reminder, let me first of all go ahead and share my screen with you. But just a reminder that for those of you that are in the class, a lot of files have been provided for you. I've got those files right here in this folder called Layers. Route 66, we're going to have some fun with Route 66 today, and there are several images in there that we're going to be using as we learn more about layers. If you're not taking the class, if you just stumbled across this on YouTube, I'm sorry, you're going to have to go out and find your own images. Just make sure that they're images that are categorized as having permission to use with modification, and figure that out in Google so that you can get images that you can use, you can modify, you can create your own image, and then you can post up there without fear of copyright infringement. So let's go ahead and jump right on in to Photoshop, and let's go ahead and have some fun with that. Let me see if I can move my screen around. So today's lesson is all about layers. We're going to jump on in. So this section down here in the lower right hand corner, lots of layers. We're going to be doing some things there. We're also going to be using plenty of our tools. You'll learn a few new tools that you haven't been introduced to yet, and we'll be using some other tools that we already should be familiar with. But the first thing we're going to do, what we're going to do today is we are going to create a postcard. Remember back in the day when postcards used to go traveling. If you're a young kid, if you're under, actually probably if you're under 30 years old, is probably meaningless to you. But back in the day, we used to go traveling, take family vacations, and you'd run across these little tourist shops that still are around, and you can buy postcards, and we would send postcards back to friends and family. So here's an example of a old school postcard. This one's from probably way back in the 40s or 50s. It's really old, but kind of a fun thing. The thing I like about this is Route 66. I'm kind of a Route 66 fan, and I've always wanted to take that road trip. Haven't got there yet, but so today we're gonna build our own version of a Route 66 postcard, and we'll get going on that here right away. So while we're in Photoshop, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create our canvas area. And so we're going to go under File and New. And right here, I'm going to call this Postcard Route 66. Okay? And you see I've been in here fooling around, practicing a little bit. So you see that my image size is already 4 inches by 6 inches. That's kind of the typical size for a postcard. So go ahead and create your own image. That's 4 by 6 inches in your measurements. Make sure it is a 300 pixels per inch resolution. If you remember, that's 300 resolution is our minimum resolution for something that's going to be printed. I'm also going to set my color mode to CMYK color because I have the intention of printing this in 8-bit. And we're gonna run into some issues today regarding these color modes, so I'm going to show you that. So just remember, we are in CMYK color, 8-bit, and the rest of this, I'm going to start with a transparent background. Remember, I like that, and then the rest of everything that's on here should be okay. So let's just go ahead and hit OK. And here you see our image. Now, if you remember from the postcard that I just showed you a moment ago, it was not this aspect ratio of portrait. It was more of a landscape. And that's the type of aspect ratio that I want to work in today. So I'm just going to simply go up here to Image and Image Rotation. And it has a nice 90-degree clockwise rotation. We'll do that. And now I'm all set to work in the aspect ratio that I want to work in. Okay, so if we go back to our folder full of Route 66 images, I showed you the one. I showed you the one postcard. Here's another one that's a little bit more simplified, kind of a cartoony look, and we'll have some fun with that type of look. I'll show you how to create that too. So we're going to dive into filters just a little bit. Okay, so that's kind of a fun look. You got the Route 66 highway sign. In the background, we've got kind of looks like a New Mexico landscape, possibly, maybe Arizona, definitely one of those states there, I'm sure. And so that's what we're going to start with. We've got a couple of images in our folder that are New Mexico scenery. And we've got that one here that looks just about identical to that background. We might want to use those. You can kind of do your own version if you like, but what I'm going to start with is a car. And in here I've got this 57 Bel Air classic car. I also have a couple of GIFs of or cartoony things of VW buses. But after playing around here and jumping in earlier, I decided I'm gonna go with the Bel Air. And so I'm going to drop that Bel Air right in here. And you see in my my cutting there, it kind of looks like we got a flat tire in the back. But you know what? It's okay because we're going to end up hiding much of those rough areas there. So to start with, I'm going to flip this around. So while we've got it pointing from right to left, I'm going to actually flip it so it's going left to right. And the good thing is, hey, there's no driver in the car. So we can get away with that. So I'm going to go under Edit. I'm going to choose Transform. And I'm going to go right down here to the bottom here where it says Flip Horizontal. And click on that. And there we go. Okay. So now I've got my car in there. We'll come back to where we're going to place that exactly. But I just want to scoot that over here a little bit. I want to hide that flat tire. That thing's kind of ugly. So let me just step back just a bit. You notice that I have this wireframe around here. And if you're struggling with that and trying to get rid of that in order to move your image, all you got to do is hit Enter. Should tell you that. Just hit Enter in Photoshop, and that'll get rid of it. Okay, so if we look down here, look down here in our layers window, we have our first layer here, and it is our 57 Bel Air sitting on top of that transparent background. Okay, so we've got a little bit of a start here. Much of this stuff is going to be really simplified, but I want to go next to our Route 66 sign. And I'm going to go ahead and pull that right on into our image. And you'll notice that doesn't say Route 66. It says Route 99. And Route 99 actually was a route in the same era as Route 66, but Route 99 went all the way up the Pacific coast, went through California, Oregon, and Washington. A little history lesson for you right here. The road itself is primarily in existence still, but has been adopted as state highways. So there's a state highway, California State Highway 99, get into Oregon and Washington. One of them calls it a state route, but it still exists. So if you want to take that trip, that's another fun trip. But the reason I chose this sign is I like the kind of beat up look that it's got. We've got some bullet holes in there. Somebody's been shooting at the sign. It's faded, and it just looks like it's got a lot of character. And I really like that. So we're going to work with this just a little bit to flip that 99 over and make it a 66. To do that, to start with, I'm going to enlarge my screen just as much as I can. If you remember, your keyboard shortcut for that is Command 0. just hit Command 0 on the PC. If you're on a Mac, that'll be Control 0, and that will enlarge your canvas area as big as it will fit in your Photoshop interface. Okay, so that's our starting point. What we're going to do now is we're going to go back up to some selection tools that we're familiar with. I'm going to choose the Polygon Lasso tool, and I'm going to take that and I'm going to just kind of zip around this first 9, and it gets a little complicated here with that bullet hole smudge. And I'm going to get as close as I can to the 9 and kind of scoot through there. And there we go. I've got my 9 selected. So I'm going to copy it. I'm going to paste it. And then I'm going to go Edit, Transform, and I'm going to rotate this 180 degrees. So there I've got my 6, my first 6, and you see it's kind of messy back behind that. I'll show you how to fix that. But I'm going to go back, make sure you check your layer here again. Okay, go back to the Route 66 sign layer, and notice again how I've got each of my layers named. It's simple because at this point I'm just using images, and so each of my images are named, and that names the layer then. That's kind of handy. That won't always be the case. Notice here I've created a new layer, layer 1. For right now I'm going to leave that as layer 1 because it's going to end up being invisible. But I'm going to select my Route 66 sign layer again, and now I can go in and I can select my other 9 to make that one also a 6. And you can see here I'm getting kind of sloppy. I'm not being real precise around the edges, except I do want to come in between the number and go down through this gap where there's that bullet hole mess right there. I'm going to come right back to the beginning, and I can see my little circle in the corner of my Polygon Lasso tool. It tells me I'm there. I'll click that, and I've got my selection. Copy, Command C or Control C on the PC, Command V to paste it, and there it is. It's popped up and created layer 2 for me. So every time we paste a copied object, it will create a new layer and it will have that object on a new layer. So once again, under Edit, Transform, and I'm going to rotate 180 degrees. Okay, so there I have my 66 now. What I'm going to do in this case, I'm going to go back to my Move tool. That's my default. I'm going to take these 2 layers here. Layer 1 is my 6 on the left. Layer 2 is my 6 on the right. And I'm going to right-click after I've selected both of these layers. I'm going to right-click and I'm going to select Merge Layers. Okay. Notice it gives me several different options while merging. I can merge layers. I can merge the visible layers only. So if I have some invisible layers, they will not join the merge. And then I can flatten the image. I don't want to do either of those last 2. I simply want to merge my 6s. So instead of being on 1 layer, they are on 2. Or instead of on 2 layers, they are on 1. So I've gone ahead and merged. And they are now there on their own layer. Next thing we need to do is we're going to make this layer invisible simply by clicking this eyeball. This little eyeball icon right there will make that layer invisible. It's still there. I can turn the eyeball on, and there it is. But we're going to make it invisible for right now. And then I'm going to go back again to my Route 66 sign layer. And what we need to do here is we need to clean up the 9s. Basically, we need to erase them, except we can't just simply erase them because we've got this background of the sign that we need to get in there. And so what we have is another tool, is right here, the clone stamp tool is what we're going to use. Okay, so it says we haven't defined an area. Oops. Okay, so we need to define an area that we're going to clone. And to do that, we're going to select Option, or on the PC, it's Alt, Option, and then you get this little target area here. And I'm just going to select an area that's relatively clean, just like that. And now it's giving me another little warning here. It says the smart object must be rasterized before proceeding. Okay, so do we want to rasterize the smart object? I do want to go ahead and do that. I want to make sure that I'm rasterizing only the single layer that I am working on. I don't want to rasterize the entire project or all of the layers on there. So I also like the fact that I've enlarged this sign. It will probably not end up being that large in the final image, but we'll go ahead and hit OK now. And we've rasterized it. Now notice I've got a brush size tool right in the center of my red circle now. I'm going to go ahead and enlarge that. Remember, to enlarge that is your square brackets. Right will enlarge it, left will decrease it. So I'm going to enlarge this pretty good size. I don't want to get too crazy because it will impact the quality of the image, but that's a pretty good size, I think. I've already selected my image area that I'm going to clone, and now I can go ahead and start cloning. Now notice how just to the left of my red circle you'll see a little X or a cross. Okay, that is indicating the selection or the area that's getting pulled over and copied into my 9. So once I get actually into the 9, you'll notice that it starts creating that color again and duplicating the 9. So I don't want to do that as I'm cleaning up, trying to get rid of these 9s. I just want to go as far as I need to. Okay. And we're doing that. And actually, it looks like I could probably go ahead and increase the size of my brush just a bit. And go ahead and clean that up. And look at that. It looks like we're just erasing that 9, but we're leaving kind of that rustic background, sign background behind. I'm going to come back to this area. That area I want to be careful with because I don't want to lose the those bullet holes. And our 6, the tail on the 6 is going to come around differently than it's going to for the 9. Let's go ahead and zoom in here. Remember Command plus again, and we can get in and look at some good detail. And I'm going to be really careful around here. Now, you'll notice that as I take this brush, you can see my brush right in the middle there, that white spot. It's really got soft edges to it. So what I'm going to do is going to come up into the top left corner, and you see there is my brush size. It's a size 50. And you can see up above it the icon. It shows it's got very soft edges. So I'm going to click this down arrow here, and I'm going to change the hardness right here. The hardness is set to 0, which means it is as soft as we can get those edges. So if I slide this arrow right over here to the left, I'm not going to go clear over to 100%, but 75, 80% ought to do it. And now I've got a harder edge. Looking here, it's a much harder edge. So I'm going to continue cleaning up, and I can come a little closer to my edges here. Okay. And I'm just going to try to clean this. Looks a little bit more populated with dirt and grain and so forth than I would normally like to see. So I'm going to go here to my spot healing brush, select that, and I'm going to clean up a few of these. I just need to swipe. See that big swipe right there? When I let go of that, it's cleaned that area up a great deal. Sometimes I'll need to go over things a couple of times, but for the most part, one swipe will do a lot of good. And I want this still to look pretty random. So I'm just kind of randomly going around here and cleaning up some of the speckles. Okay? And I'm going to call that good for right now. I'm going to come over to my second 9, and on this one I'm going to select, I'm going to go back to my clone stamp tool right here. Notice the shortcut is S for stamp, and for this one I'm going to choose this area over here to the right of that 9. Again, hit my Option key and get my target area. Click, and now it's selected that area, and I can come over here and I can start painting. Now look at that right there. You see how I've got that purple again? Okay, so I probably didn't get far enough away from my 9. So I'm going to go back to select my area. I'm going to go, actually I want to decrease the size of my brush. Again, that's a pretty good sized area, so I'm going to get it as far away as I can, hit Option and select. Okay, and now let's give that another try and see how we do. Okay, there we go, much cleaner. And I'm just going to swipe, swipe, swipe. Go back up here to clean that up. And now that we've got a little bit of a gap, we can go ahead and enlarge our brush size. And oops, got a little bit of overlap there. So I can't do the whole thing all at the same time, because you notice there's that cross again. This time it's over to the right, and that's indicating the area that we're pulling content from. So I'm not going to be able to go just real big swipes. I'm going to have to kind of take this piece by piece. That's okay. It'll give me a better looking image background in the end. And now some of you are saying, well, what does this have to do with layers? Well, not really a whole lot, except that we are needing to use layers in order to get our, oops, I'm going to undo that, in order to get our 6s to appear up there. So once again, I've got some residual mess. I'm going to go back to my spot healing brush, and I'm going to swipe some of these areas. Look at that, it just disappears. That's so cool. Okay, kind of clean up my background just a little bit, make it look a little more random. I don't want to see patterns in there. I don't want anyone to look at it and say, oh, I can see where there was a 9, and he just flipped over the 9 and made it into a 6. Okay, so I'm just going to clean these areas up. And that looks better. Again, it's not perfect, but it does look better. But remember, we are going to put our 6s on top of there. So let's go ahead and back out, Command 0. Here's the full size of our image. Back to our Move tool. And let's go back to now to Layer 1 and select that. Bring it back on. And our 6s are right there in place. Okay. Now, do they look exactly lined up where we want them to be? I don't know. To me, they look maybe slightly skewed to the left. So I'm in my move tool already. If you're not there, hit your V, and then just use your arrows on your keyboard, and we'll slide it over to the left a little bit. Now we can start to see we're seeing some overlap because of the sloppiness of our cut. So now we're going to go zoom back in here. See, there's one area right there. This time I'm going to use my eraser tool. And shortcut for the eraser tool, you guessed it, E. Right? And that's that one, this tool right here. Okay, eraser tool. And I'm just going to do a little bit of work here to try and erase some of that sloppy cutout. Okay. But I don't need to do the whole thing, because for the most part we really can't tell where those edges are unless we're looking really closely. That does bring up one thing, that as I look at your projects, your various assignments and exercises, I will likely go in and look at these at about 200%. If you'll notice, that's what we're zoomed into right now. Zoomed into 200%. For my purposes in this class, if it looks good and clean at 200%, then you're probably good. For other purposes, sometimes you may need to zoom in a little bit further. So it's good to be aware of how to do that. That's what we're doing with our Command plus. We're just zooming in. So right now I'm just using that eraser tool to just kind of slide around this 1/6. Get it a little bit cleaner. We'll do the same thing on the left-hand side. Get that cutout just a little bit cleaner. Being careful not to erase any of the actual number 6. Here we go. That's looking pretty well. I'll zoom out one step, so I go to 100%. And we'll take a look at it. There's probably a couple other areas here that we might want to clean up. Right in here, right in here. Now a lot of this is training your eye to see the details that maybe you're not used to looking at. And as you start training your eye to see these details, it's going to make you a better artist. It's going to make you a better content creator, because you're looking at these details. So I'm going to call that good for right now. Okay, I'm going to back out to my full view, full window. Now the other thing that I'm noticing here is my 6s look kind of purple. Originally that was a black and white sign. So I'm going to see, before I merge those back into the sign, I'm going to see if I can maybe do something about that. I'm going to go under Image Adjustments, and I'm going to start with my brightness and contrast. I'm going to boost my contrast up. I'm going to bring my brightness down. Oh, now look what we start seeing. Okay, as we make those adjustments, then we start seeing all of those imperfections much, much more. So we can only go so far. It looks like I'm about -15 on my brightness. That's about as far as I can go. So it seems like maybe the better answer here is to go ahead and merge my 2 layers. Remember, I've got the 6s on a layer, and then I've got my sign that's been cleaned up on another layer. I'm going to go ahead and merge those. So once again, right click, and I'm going to merge layers, just like that. Notice it adopted the name of the upper layer. Okay, so the upper layer was just named layer 1, and the lower layer had the Route 66 sign in there. I'm going to go back in and rename it Route 66 sign. That'll help me stay organized as I do that. So now that I've merged those, now let me give my adjustments another try. I'm going to go back here to Image, Adjustments, Brightness and Contrast. Now that's bringing down the brightness of the entire image, so that's probably not going to work for what I want. Let's try the contrast. Okay. And that's not doing a whole lot either. So I'm just going to cancel out of that. Let's try another tool. Let's go to Adjustments. Let's go to Color Balance. So here this allows us to adjust the color at shadows, midtones, and highlights. The default is midtones, so I'm going to start right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by pulling out some red. So I'm going to use this slider. I'm going to go to the left just a little bit. This one will take me to the magenta if I go to the left, and that's a little reddish. So I'm going to actually slide to the right towards the green just a little bit. And then on the bottom layer, I'm going to slide to the right also, so we go a little bit more blue. And I don't want to go too extreme because then it starts looking really strange. So I'm going to leave that for right now and go to my shadows. And let's see what we can do here in terms of getting our numbers a little more dark. And that's darkening the whole shield, so I don't want to do that much. That's probably about as far as I want to go right there. Let's try the highlights and see if we can get away with anything there. If we go extreme, you can see what's going on here. And so if I want to make that a little more white, I can take this bottom slider towards the yellow. And we can look at what the green and magenta do. So I want to slide that more towards the green. And then my cyan and red. That's what that does. So maybe a little towards the cyan, maybe slightly, but I don't want to go too far off there. Okay. So that's about what I can do with the color balance. I'm going to try my hue and saturation. Again, this is going to impact the entire image, the shield and the lettering. So I don't know how much I'm going to be able to do here, but the first slider here is my hue. I'm going to take that to the left just a little bit. And there you see we're getting rid of some of that red. Our text here is looking a little darker, a little blue-ish, but it is closer to the black that we wanted. If we go too far, then we start changing the color of the shield. Okay. Saturation, what happens if we take that all the way down? Look at that. But then the color of the bullet holes and so forth changes as well. So we could pull the saturation completely out, but I kind of like the color, the rusty color that's coming from those. So I will bring my saturation down a fair amount, but I do want to leave some of that color in there. Maybe a little bit less even. Okay. And lightness, I think we're doing good there, so probably just going to leave that at 0. And hit OK. So there we've got our sign, and it's fixed. So now it reads Route 66. I'm going to go back to my Move tool and select my transform. That's Command T to transform. And we get this little box here. And if we grab a corner, it'll just drag that. It'll keep the aspect ratio to what it is. If you want to change the aspect ratio, you can do that by hitting the Shift key while you're dragging. So there it can stretch things out and so forth. Let me undo that, because normally we don't want to stretch an object out. We just want to keep it in the aspect ratio that it is in. So I'm going to move this over here. The transform tool also allows me to rotate a little bit. So I'm going to put a little bit of rotation on that sign. Gives it a little bit of a more creative look. That might be a little too much. We'll bring it down. We can always come back and change that more if we want to. Okay. So here's what we've got so far. We have our 57 Bel Air layer. We have our Route 66 layer. We need to get a few more objects in here. So let's go back to our folder, and you'll notice that, well, let's see, that's kind of a rustic picture. We're probably not going to use that, but it will give us some motivation, give us some ideas. Okay. I'm going to go back here up to the top, and I have a couple of retro gas pumps that I want to use. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in the first gas pump. Okay, there's a red one, and I'll just leave that right there. I'm going to hit enter to get rid of that wireframe, and I'm going to go back in here. I have another one that's blue. It's a real pale light blue, and there we go. Now what's nice is I've made both of these the same size, or pretty close to it. So as I hit enter there, and then I go back to my move tool, and I slide the blue one away from the red one, they do indeed look pretty close to the same size. Now one thing I noticed here is if I put the blue one on the right and the red one on the left, so we look in here, we've got the hoses, and they're getting crammed together. That's probably not what how they designed those to be. So I'm going to go move these back over this way. Okay, just like that. And may not end up seeing these, but I'm looking at the bases here. That makes it look like the red one is way behind the blue one. I'm going to actually switch that. This is another layers thing. We can come over to my layer here. Here's my gas pump red. I'm just simply going to drag that, click and drag, move that on top of the blue one. Now as you come over here, you can see that it has been pulled up in front. We're going to use that same technique here right away again. This time I'm going to hit my shift key, and I'm going to select both gas pumps, and I'm going to pull them down behind the Chevy Bel Air. Okay, you notice how that just shoved them right behind there because I changed the order of my layers. Okay, so that's how your layers will impact a lot of what you're doing with your design. Now the other thing that I want to do with these two layers, the gas pumps, because I've got them the same size and I want them to be the same size relative to each other throughout this entire process, is I'm going to link these two together. So everything that I do to the red one, I'll also do to the blue one. And to make that simple, I'm just going to come down here to these little icons over here. And the first one on the left is a chain link. So I'll simply click that while I've got these two layers selected. Click that chain link, and now they are linked together. Okay, so I just pull one over and the other will come with it. Okay, that's all I have to do. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so I see a little bit more space, and I'm going to transform, Command T, and I want to make these just a little bit smaller. I want to keep the aspect ratio the same, so I'm not going to hit any other keys. Simply going to drag that corner down, and now it's made it about the same size as it looks like it should be. I'm going to slip these down here, see if this works to get rid of those kind of ugly bases. And now I'll need to make those a little bit bigger. I don't know if that makes sense visually. I need to slide them up a little bit still. Again, all of this stuff we can adjust because each of our objects is on its own layer, and that makes designing things much, much easier. So there we've got a little scene that we're building. Car, gas tanks, or gas pumps, and a Route 66 sign. The last thing we need to do is we need to put something in the background here to make it look like it's in a Route 66. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've found Pete's gas station. This one I had to do a little bit of modifying to in order to make it usable for this design. That's a different lesson, but let's go ahead and pull this in. And there we have Pete's Gas Station Museum, one of the famous museums on Route 66. And once again, you notice now it's laid over top everything. We can catch a little bit of the car back there, a little bit of the gas pumps. So that's not what we want. We want those other objects out in front of Pete's Gas Station. So we'll come over to our layers. I'm going to drag this down, and I'm going to use this as my bottom layer. Okay. And now we've got that gas station back behind everything. But we're not seeing a whole lot of that gas station, are we? So what I want to do here is I'm going to take the gas pumps and the Bel Air. So these three layers that I've selected here, and I want to shrink them down just a little bit. So we're going to hit Command T to get our transform tool. Grab a corner and just pull that down to the point where it looks like it could potentially be sitting out in front of Pete's Museum. Okay, that looks a little bit better. I'm not really liking the angle of this car much at all. So I'm going to try another something here. I'm going to select just that car layer, and I'm going to get my transform tool again, Command T, just for my car layer. And remember, we can do a little bit of rotation here. So I'm going to just touch it just a little bit, see if I can rotate that car. And that looks a little bit more like it belongs in that parking lot. If we go too far, it's going to really start looking funny. So we can't really do that. We can only touch it up just a little bit. So right about there is about all we can do. I'm also going to take my gas pumps. I'm going to make them a little bit smaller to make them appear as though they're a little farther away from that car. But of course, then we need to change the position of them as well. So kind of bring them up over here. It is covering up the car in the background. And that kind of makes it look a little bit more dimensional, as though this car and these pumps might be on the corner of that lot. We could probably do better, but in the interest of time, these are the images that we're going to work with, and you'll be able to build your own image similar to this in just a minute. Now, I want to go back to Pete's Gas Station again. That layer, if we look at that layer, let's go over here and just look at that layer only. So a little shortcut here. Remember the eyeball. If I click the eyeball, that makes the layer invisible. What if I want to make all layers except one invisible? Well, I might go through and click each and every one of these. That's going to get very tedious. And so Photoshop offers you this little shortcut where you can hit Option and the eyeball on the one layer that you want to keep. Notice everything else went away. So there's Pete's Gas Station. I'm going to point this out just in the way of helping train your eye. Don't see it already. Got a little bit of a mess right here. This is an area where I did some doctoring on this original image. There was a Ford pickup sitting there that was certainly was an antique. It was probably a 70s era, but it didn't fit with the era of these other vehicles, the 40s and 50s era vehicles. And so I wanted to get rid of that. I took it out of there using some other tools that we will get to later. But I'll be able to, we have covered that up with the Bel Air, and you don't even notice. So let's look at Pete's gas station here. A couple of things that I want to point out. Also, look at the sky. That sky background is checkerboard. That means it's transparent. I've gone ahead and I've cut out the sky from this image. And there's a reason for that, because I want to show you another option that we can use. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and bring back all of our other layers. We're going to do the same thing on the Pete's gas station layer. Hovering over the eye, I'm going to hit Option and click the eye. So we brought back all of our layers. We've got a little scene here, but one of the things that I notice about this whole scene is we've taken real life photographs, merged several of those images together, and now what's happened is that it doesn't look quite right. It looks pretty good. I'm going to move this Route 66 sign just a little bit more. It seems to be a better position. It looks pretty good, but we can see a lot of flaws in this. So one thing that we're going to do to cover up some of these flaws, I'm going to start again with our Bel Air. I'm going to apply a filter. And the filter I want will kind of give this a little bit of an animation cartoony look, similar to that other postcard that we looked at the beginning of the lesson here. I'll just bring that up again. So that'll give it a similar look as that. Okay, so we'll start with the Bel Air, and we'll go up to the very top here. We'll choose filter. I want to go to my filter gallery. Notice my filter gallery is grayed out. Well, I learned something the hard way, that when you're in CMYK mode, remember as we first created this image, we chose CMYK color mode because we planned on printing this image. Well, if you're in CMYK color mode, then you will not be able to access your filter gallery. So now you're saying, are you kidding me? We've done all this work for nothing. We got to go back and start over from scratch. Well, no, you don't. Good news is we can change our color mode simply by going up here under Image, and the first option there is Mode, and we have several different color modes to choose from, and I am now going to just select RGB color. And in selecting RGB color, it's asking me now, do I want to merge all of my layers or not? And the default is merge. In this case, I do not want to merge them because I want to keep each of those layers separate. So I'm going to hit don't merge, and it's also asking me if I want to rasterize. Do not rasterize. I want to leave those layers just the way they were. Later on, we might need to make a choice about rasterizing. But for now, we want to leave them the way they are. So now all we have done, you see no visual difference. All we've done is changed from CMYK color mode to RGB color mode. And now we can go in and access our filter gallery. Filter I want to use is this fourth one down here in the left column called Poster Edges. So each of these filters will put a little bit different effect on that car, but the Poster Edges one is the one that kind of makes it look a little bit cartoony. I can go up on the upper right and I can adjust the edge thickness. Again, I'll go extreme on each of these so you can see what it's doing. I can touch up the edge intensity or not. So I can play with that. I don't like it up high like that. It looks kind of messy. I want to make this look fairly clean still. So I'm going to bring that all the way down to 0. And I can adjust my posterization. Again, 0 to 6 on that one. So I'm going to come in probably with about a 3, probably midway. I think that looks pretty good. It makes that look a little bit more like a cartoon drawing. Let's try and see what happens if we go up to 4. 4 is not bad either. Okay, so right in that range, 3 or 4. Okay, go ahead and do that. Now I want to do that with each of my layers. If we come down here, notice that the Bel Air 57 Bel Air layer now has a smart filters attached to it and a filter gallery attached. So these are kind of well, not really layers, but they are attached to this layer. So what I can do if I decide that I don't want that filter on here, or I want to see what it looks like without that filter, see the eyeball right there? I can go ahead and click that eyeball off, and it takes that filter off. Or I can hit my smart filters. It's like a folder or group, and if I had multiple filters on there, it would get rid of each of them. Or if I'm happy with that and I don't want to see each of these attached objects, I can come right over here and I can close that, and it'll just fold it right up. It's all still there, it's just folded right up. Now, I've already mentioned I want to do the same filter effect on each of my other layers. So I want to go ahead and apply the same effect to each of these other layers. So let me go select just my red pump. And here it allows me to go back to my filter gallery, select my poster edges. I'm going to use the same settings that I used for the car. Go to filter and filter gallery while we're on the blue gas pump. Notice it remembered poster edges, remembered the last filter that I used. So I can select that and fold that up. The last one is Pete's gas station. Let's apply that. Go to the filter gallery and choose poster edges again. Posterization on Pete's gas station I'm going to bring up to about a 5. Let's see if that looks any better. We've got a little bit going on there. We forgot to do the Route 66 sign. This one, it looks like we need to convert for a smart filter. So let's go ahead and choose that. Now it's been converted, and the way you can tell is you see this little icon down here in the layer, larger icon. You got a little square right there. That tells us that it is now a smart layer, and we can apply filters to it. So filter gallery again my poster edges, and we can see a little bit there. Now we're almost done, but not quite. You notice I brought up the missing sky. So this is another fun thing to do with filters. What does it have to do with layers? Not a whole lot, except that it will live on its own layer. So let's go ahead and select, let's create a new layer. Down in our Layers tab, again, down to the bottom menu, we have all of these icons down here. The last one, obviously, trash. We're deleting something. We don't want to do that. But the one just to the left has a plus sign. That means we can add a layer. You notice that when we do add a layer, it will add that layer right above the layer that we have selected. In this case, what I want to do is I want to add a layer to the very bottom, but it won't allow me to do that. So I'm going to select, I'm going to add one layer, and then I'm going to come down here to my very bottom layer, and I'm going to pull it up. Now my new layer is transparent, it's on the bottom, and it's ready to go. So what I want to do here is I want to show you a nifty little filter that will work. Coming over here to my color swatches, this is going to be important. I'm going to go reset back to my black and white. Okay, that's the default. Black is our top layer color. White is our bottom layer color. Now what I'm going to do is, instead of the black, I'm going to choose a color, so I'm going to select that. I've got now a color picker, and if I take that out of this window, I've got an eyedropper, so I can click that eyedropper on any color I want. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually select a color on this blue 57 Bel Air that is close to a sky blue. I kind of like this area right in here. Okay, that's a pretty good looking sky. So you might think I just go in and fill my my sky layer, use the paint bucket tool, and there you have a sky, right? But that doesn't look very realistic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to I want some clouds in there, right? You want to create your own clouds, you can do that, but because we've been playing with filters today, there's a nifty little filter. If we go in here, and instead of going to our filter gallery, let's go down here to render, and you'll see this option here of clouds. So I'm going to go ahead and hit clouds, and notice what it's done here. It's created some nice little clouds. It has used my foreground and background colors to make puffy clouds. That's why I wanted the blue and the white together. Now, another thing about those olden day postcards is many of them had a border around the edge that kind of gave them that picture look. So we want to go ahead and do that as well. We're going to do that again on another layer, a separate layer, because as we keep each of our layers separate from one another, and that gives us a whole lot more flexibility on how we manipulate them and position them in our image. So I'm going to create a new layer, and this one I'm going to put on the very top. So I'm selecting my top layer, which is my Route 66 sign. I'm going to select new layer, and there we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this one frame. And I'm going to create a frame that's white. So I'm going to choose my color, flip-flop there, so my white is on top. I'm going to come up here and use my rectangular marquee tool, and I'm going to use my guide right here, putting that right up in the left-hand corner. Use my guide to place one object there. And I'm going to drag it all the way to the lower right corner. Use my guide again, my crosshairs, and that should give us a nice even border all the way around, except that if you remember back to our selection tools, what do we know about our selection, our marching ants that are right here? Without any others, that's going to fill the inside of that marching ants area. So what I want to do is go to select and inverse. Now we see two sets of marching ants all the way around. That tells us the outer area is what's going to work for us. I'm going to choose my paint bucket, come right in here and select, and there we have a nice little border around our image. Makes it look a little bit more like a photograph that has been printed on a card. And I'm going to choose a new layer, put it right on top of that, and I'm going to use a gradient tool. I'm going to flip my colors back, blues on top, and my paint bucket tool, if you remember, I'm going to go in here, and one of the things that it shares the space with is the gradient tool. I'm going to choose the gradient tool, and my options up at the very top change. So I can click this arrow here, and it gives me some different folder options of colors, or under basics. Under basics is where I want to be. In this case, what we want to do is blue and transparent. So we're right where we need to be, blue and transparent. And with our gradient, the amount of gradient that we use is going to be directly related to how far we drag our line. So I'm going to click and hold just a little way down, and look at that. Notice how our clouds minimized quite a bit. We just move that layer around. I'm going to see how it does. It's probably not going to impact a whole lot of things until we get back to the top again, but it will change the image just a little bit. Here's without that gradient layer. This is with the gradient layer. And I kind of like it with the gradient layer just a little bit more. There we have it. We've got our own postcard. And what I want you to do now is go out and create your own postcard for your own ideal vacation, whether it's a road trip or something else. Where do you want to go? Make me a postcard and send it back my way.